Hey everyone, Luke here, and don't you just hate it when things don't go your way? I mean, I'm trying to set up the review here, but I've been waiting for like nearly half an hour because we've had some people shouting about scrap metal outside, and that's one of the things that living in the UK you kind of have to put with. People come around and say, hey, we want your scrap metal and all of that. It's like, shut up, especially at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I'm trying to do a video here, and all I can hear is like, hey, and you can't even understand what they're saying half the time. If only this world had the demons in the promised Neverland, then maybe we could actually get rid of them, or at least threaten them to the point that they just actually stop doing it. I know they're doing their job, but still, it is quite annoying when we're trying to do our own thing as well here. But anyway, that's around for another time, and let's just get right into the review, because this week, oh my, there's quite a bit that we have to talk about. Alright guys, Lash Luke here to review The Promised Neverland chapter 110. Wow. 10 chapters of doing this and still going strong. I'm honestly really happy with the way these reviews are turning out and how I'm just able to just talk about a series that I actually love. But anyway, yeah, this is chapter 110 titled What We Must Do. And I know exactly what we must do. We must get these demons out of this world so that we can all live a happy and happy cattle-free life. But anyway, the chapter starts off with Emma just looking off over at the distance as we see the explosion that happened in the last two chapters when the shelter got destroyed and Lucas and Hugo were basically trapped in there and they're dead. Yeah, spoilers in case of anybody who hasn't seen the last chapter or the last review of mine. But yeah, Lucas and Hugo, they're dead at this point and they're not coming back. And like I said last time, I'm really happy that the writer actually went through with this and didn't like chicken us out, like saying, oh no, Hugo and Lucas, they're all right. I really love that they actually did that. They actually had the balls to kill off not just two characters, but actually two key characters that we've gone on a journey with themselves, and we've seen everything about them. And I'm really glad that they killed off pretty much, essentially, the father figures to these kids, because then it symbolizes like their youth is sort of like dying and they're like becoming more mature and really responsible people at this point. So that's what I really love about this decision to actually kill off Lucas and Hugo. So as Emma is looking off into the distance, we see Jinian and Zach come out of the underground and say to Emma, Emma, what's with that smoke? Is it in the shelter area? And we see Emma just looking on in disbelief, like Lucas and Hugo, and we see her going on to say that the new day passed into night and still they've never returned, which obviously is Emma saying to herself like they're dead at this point and there's something we can do about it. And I really like how Gillian was the one to actually come out at this point, because she is one of my favourite characters, and I've wanted to see more of her ever since the Goldie Pond arc, and I'm really glad that we're actually getting into this. Like, we're actually going to explore Gillian's situation and how she's sort of like becoming the one to be outspoken about the situation, and how that she's basically acting how Emma acted at the beginning of the series, where she was like, I want to save everyone. She's basically acting the same thing, like, I want to save Lucas and Hugo, and it's kind of like Emma's had to be like, kind of like move away from that point and say, even in this situation, there's nothing we can do about that. We get the title page, which shows just like the shelter in sort of like this tin area, and we see a hand closing it off, and we see the tag, which sees gently put a lid on the memories of those happy days, which again is a symbolic sense of saying like those happy days that you had with Lucas and Hugo over those past 2 years, they're gone now, and things really need to start being put into the next level of gear if you want to actually make a difference in this world. As everyone is in disbelief about what has just happened to the shelter, we see all the kids like just scrambling together, like Lucas, Hugo, and we see Gillian being the most outspoken about it and saying, something happened, I knew it. We have to go after them to make sure there's still time to reach the shelter before daybreak. And I understand where she's coming from, but as Ray puts it, he says, we can't. We get an image of him just like being like, we can't, showing that even though he wants to do that, he knows it's pretty much impossible at this point, that there's anything they can actually do about the situation with Lucas and Hugo. And we see him going on to say, we barely managed to get away from them. If the enemy's still alive, if they follow us here, and then what's the meaning of Hugo and Lucas helping us escape? And again, they both have valid points. Like, Gillian wants to go and check on them, like, to make sure if they really are truly okay or they're truly dead. But Ray's actually thinking more strategically, like, look, they made their sacrifice for a reason, to let us move on and move on to making a better world for us, and we can't let their sacrifice go in vain. So again, they have perfectly valid points. It's just that in this situation, Ray is in the right here, because Gillian is acting irrational, not thinking about this straight, even though it pains Ray to actually do this. It must be done because it actually needs to be done in this case if they want to make a better world for them. And I think Gillian deep down knows that, but it's just like her emotions getting better. And that's what I love about Gillian. Like, even though she puts on this like really happy cheery persona, deep down there's a lot of sadness. And I think it goes back to Goldie Pond with the issue with her sister, how when her sister died, and she just absolutely hated and despised the demons and anything associated with them, and we got that badass shot with her just saying die, and we see her just like low bullets on everyone, and we see like that really badass and evil persona inside of her. And I knew something like this was going to happen, like where there was going to like be a lot of tension about what the action should do if Lucas and Hugo actually did die. And it's really fascinating how they're actually diving into this and giving distinct personalities to several of the kids, because now they're even though there's been like a main cast like so throughout, it's only been like really Ray and Emma who've had like the most development, and it's kind of like, okay, we need to start fleshing out these other kids and giving Gillian that happy persona on the outside, but that really deep dark sadness on the inside. It gives her a distinct feeling and a unique feeling to stand out from the crowd, and that's what I love about her. Gillian goes on to explain that the two are late, okay, but there's still no sign of the enemy either. Those two must have won. What if they're beating the soldiers but are trapped and now can't move, or something like that? And she continues to go on and say there would still be time to save them if we leave right now. And we see her like just getting desperate as well, and seeing that flashback of that Just Imagine plays of just Hugo and Lucas trapped. I'm like, oh my god, don't show that, especially after the happy ending that we had for that, like, well, the bittersweet ending that we had from the last show. Just seeing them like that, it's like, oh, that just tears at your heart, don't you think? And even though people might not think of that, it's like I can be quite an emotional person. I can get really sentimental, especially with a character that is actually in my top 5, and just seeing Hugo like that, it's just like, it pains me. And Ray is just like trying to maintain a sense of control here, as we see in the panel where we see him just like gritting his teeth. It's like he wants to say something at this point, and sure enough he goes on to say, all the soldiers won and they just haven't found us yet. Listen, if that's the case, then don't waste what Hugo and Lucas gave their lives for. And we see everyone just being like mourning Lucas and Hugo, and we see Gillian just starting to break down. And again, Ray is in the right here. It's like they don't know what has happened, and for all they know, the enemy could find them, and then they're all dead, and then Lucas and Hugo died for nothing. So they have to like, okay, they have to accept that Lucas and Hugo are gone, and they really need to start moving on and thinking about what the next plan is at this situation. As things start to get a little bit heated, we see Oliver say to Ray and Gillian, you two, that's enough. And we see Ray and Gillian like apologise to each other, and this is great of Oliver actually being the one to actually sort of like become the de facto leader of these group of kids. Him and Emma and Ray are sort of like the de facto leader. Like, Oliver's the leader of the Goldie Pond kids, and Ray and Emma are the leader of the Gracefield kids, and they need each other at this point, because if they start breaking off, even though it's kind of a thing that's what's going to happen at the end of the chapter, like they're just going to start breaking apart from each other because of what's happened. They all need to stick together if they want to get out of this situation and survive. And from a storytelling perspective, that is actually great. But again, in terms of like giving characters individual personalities, that's something that needs to happen so that we can actually get to know these kids, and they're not just like fodder for an enemy to actually kill. And even though they would be killed, it would be a shocking moment, the only characters that really have had an impact that would make the audience truly care about are like Emma, Ray, Oliver, Gillian, Zach, Pepe and Nigel. Like, those characters, and Sonia, like those characters are like the ones that would actually have an impact, whereas all the others would essentially just be fodder. And yeah, it would be sad, but it's like we wouldn't actually care about them, and I feel like that's what needs to happen. And it's something that Controlled Chaos actually brought up, and the more I thought about it, yeah, the more their point is valid. Like, there's too many kids and we need to start weeding it out, so like some kids actually get some screen time to actually have their characters developed, while others sort of like take a back burner at this point. and I'm really hoping that that happens, especially with what happens at the end of the chapter. As everyone starts to get really emotional, we see Sandy sort of like giving them a pep talk and saying, we still don't know if they're alive or not. And he goes on to say, even Ray wants to go after them right now, and even Gillian knows that we can't do that, and all they can do is wait. Everybody's nervous about it, and yeah, that is kind of important, especially since now that their father figures have left them to fend for themselves. They really can't think about what's going to happen, and they're sort of like all over the place, and they sort of like need to like, okay, calm down and figure out what the next strategy is going to be. And if they start getting fighting with each other, then the whole group's going to fall apart, and eventually everybody's going to be like, oh, more characters dying left, right and centre, and it's really going to make an emotional impact on Emma, especially when she wants everybody to survive, but they can't survive if they all don't work together, and they can't work together if they're all fighting about what they think is right and what they think is the safest way to go in this situation. As everybody starts to calm down, we see Emma thinking to herself and seeing that vision of Hugo giving her sense of like, look, what you have to do now is think about what the next move's going to be. That's the best way to approach things. And once again, I want to stress how I really love that about Emma's mind, how it's taken on the personas of different characters so that we can see them again, but they're not being cheaped out like they're coming back from the dead. And I really like the direction that they've took that with Emma's character, how all the characters that she's had an impact on have sort of like become visages in her mind again, so that we as an audience get to see them again and realise why we love those characters, but we're not cheapened out by their deaths. She goes on to think to herself and say, I really want to go and check on them, but Ray's right, we can't approach the shelter, it's a bad idea, we can only wait. And then she thinks about the Seven Walls, and just mentioning the Seven Walls just really gets me excited that we're actually going to see Songju and Musica at some point, maybe even in the next chapter based on what happens at the end of this chapter, which when we get to the end of this chapter I'm going to talk about that, because there's been a lot of divisive about the ending of that chapter and at the end and the last panel, and you'll know about it once I actually get to it. But anyway, moving back to this point in the chapter, she says, now's not the time, we don't have everything we need, it's too risky. Again, showing that Emma is just sort of like taking on that responsibility and like thinking like, okay, we don't have everything right now, we can only wait and see and plan together what our next strategy is going to be, because we need everything we can if we want to actually make it to the Seven Walls, to make this promise and create a new world for not just for us but for every other people. Because again, we don't know the full aspects of this world, and for all we know, even though they've said, even though the Rotary clan and the demons like made that promise, for all we know, the Rotary clan could be sending in babies, like could be actually kidnapping babies to actually send to the orphanages to be livestock for the demons. Oh my god, I could actually see that actually happening right now. Like, okay guys, literally I've just come up with this, like, what if the Rotary clan are actually like bending the rules actually, like saying like, okay, the kids are going to be sent in to the orphanages, but they're actually not going to be like bred in the farms. They're actually going to be humans taken from human world that actually kidnapped to actually increase the populace of the demon world, to actually keep the promise going out, to keep the demons at bay. So like maybe the Rotary clan, like Peter is like actually sacrificing humans in order to keep the demons at bay, so like a whole war doesn't break out. That is actually a possibility that could actually happen. And yeah, I am not kidding. I've literally just thought of that idea at this point, and the more now that I'm starting to think about it, the more that just makes sense of how much of an evil scumbag Peter actually is. And I wouldn't be surprised if we actually got to a point where it's actually feel like humans are being taken from human world into demon world as little babies. Like they're thinking like, oh, these kids, they're being abandoned by their parents, oh wow, we can just use them as food. That is actually a dark reality that this series could actually take, and I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happened in the slightest. As Emma continues on to think, she says to herself, and the enemy, the Rotary clan, won't stop at this. Oh no, they will not stop at this, Emma, because Peter Rotary, I have to say, even though we don't know much about him or how evil he actually is, he's pretty much, in my opinion, one of the most evil villains in any anime or manga. He's like right up there with Aizen and Father and Johan. Like those three, like Peter Rotary is actually a really despicable, despised person that needs to be killed by the end of the series. I mean, all the other characters, like Grandma, I could see actually dying, and Isabella, I'm kind of on the fence that if she actually dead or not, but Peter Rhetoric, no, he has to die. He's just a despicable person, as we saw in chapter, I think it was chapter 101, it was either 100 or 101, where he just killed those people just because he thought that they were traitors to the cause, and he had no fucks about killing them, just like shot them dead. He's just a fascist dictator that wants to be in control, wants to keep the promise, and he needs to die, and I just despise him. But that just shows what a great villain he actually is, right up there with Andrew as well. Just someone that you despise, but you also are fascinated about and want to know more about him as a character. But anyway, she continues to go on and say, like, if they raid us in this condition, it's all over. What we have to do now is recover and be ready. And we see the determined look on her face, like, yes, they are going to do this. And they really need to, like, figure out what their next strategy is actually going to be. Emma finishes her thoughts by saying, first we have to establish living conditions here. That's our first priority. Ensure our safety and harden our defences. Although they still have, they still could contact Songju and Musica. I'm surprised Ray or Emma or none of the other kids have actually brought them up at this point. It's like, hey, we have allies here, we have demons here, but I pretty much understand why they've actually done that. It's like they don't want to separate the groups even more at this point. And if they mention like, oh, there are demons in this undergrowth, they might actually, the Grace Valley kids or the Grand Valley kids, the Goldie Pond kids, they might actually be like a little bit skeptical, so they might not actually trust them, and might actually think like Emma and Ray and the Gracefield kids have been in cahoots with the demons the whole time. So I can see that they've actually done that. Why they've actually not mentioned it? It's they could have actually mentioned it in secret to Emma and Ray, like just brought each other to one side and be like, hey, can't we just contact Sandra and Musica and have them help us out here? But again, that might be the reason why they might scare the other kids that have come from Goldie Pond. But anyway, Emma continues on to say, listen everyone, first of all, let's fill our bellies. And we see her like just putting up on a happy face, like again, just sort of like keeping that more, what's the word? What's the word? That sense of happiness up. I can't think of the word. It begins with M, but I can't think of the word at this point. But yeah, keeping that sense of morality up. Yeah, morality, I think that's the word. And we see everybody just like preparing food, and we see them trying to put on a happy face, but that's all they really can do and what they must do. And all these lives were rescued by Lucas and Hugo, and all of us will work together to protect them, and they can't stop fighting. And again, I really love that about Emma's characters. Like, even though she doesn't want to fight, she knows that it's a necessary evil. Like, I think she thinks of herself as an evil person at this point because of what she's actually been doing. Like, she's been taking lives herself, and I think she thinks herself as evil. But the Rotari clan and the demons, they're more of an evil, and they need to actually be stopped. But again, she doesn't know the full extent of what's actually going on, and she doesn't know that that some demons might actually just want to live their lives. I mean, even though she's been into those demon towns, she doesn't necessarily know their whole culture, and know that maybe they just want to live their normal lives and just be left alone to their own devices, and don't want to actually be involved with fighting anyone at this point. After all the commotion and after everything settled down, Emma is seen taking notes as Oliver is looking over at a piece of paper that was handed to him by Lucas before they actually split off, and he calls Emma over to have a talk with her, and we see him handing her and saying, please read this. And he says, Lucas handed it to me when we left the shelter. And she's like, a note? And we see her reading the note, and it says and it actually has Oliver relaying the information to Emma that Lucas said that it's the contents of the final call to that room Lucas received right before the attack. And we see Emma looking shocked and surprised, like, wait, there was a call before we were actually attacked? And we see them going on to actually think about this, and it's like, a call, so we had another contact? And Olive goes, we did, but the enemy said that they killed every single supporter. And we see a flashback with Lucas looking at grabbing the phone, and we see him going, first there was a static noise, then a 20-second recording, and then we see, I am William Minerva, I am raising the banner of revolution to give the human world back to you, to finish the Neverland once and for all. I shall seal a new promise. First of all, break out of the plantation and enter the following points. I'll be waiting for you, all of you. 735-941 10, 10, 7, 13, 13 11, 2, 21, 8, and Oliver goes on to say, then it lists more numbers, it's all written on the notes, and Emma's like, so is Minerva alive then? No, this must be in another recording, but, and then Oliver goes, it's been nagging on my mind. You and Lucas have both heard a direct recording from Minerva in Goldie Pond. It felt like Minerva was offering us a choice to us cattle children, and we see them looking back over what Minerva actually said, like, he won't interfere with what they're actually going to do, but he will give them the choice to break the promise, and he won't stop them, and neither will his allies. And to finish Neverland once and for all, which Emma in her mind says, but this time it feels very different, and we see her like thinking over this. Did he survive and change his mind, or is it another person altogether? What does it mean? And Oliver goes on to say with Emma, anyway, we can be at least sure that it's not an enemy. Yes, the time of this call, if it was them, they could have called us before and sent us set us up to some sort of ambush. That would be much more logical, and I agree with that. And Control Chaos actually brought this up, and it's really great that they're actually considering that this is actually an option. Like, it's actually a coincidence that, we got this call right before the attack talking about a revolution, which is very different from what Minerva said, and it might be that the name Minerva is just passed down from one person to the next to use for whatever devices they are, and it could be very possible, like Control Chaos actually brought this up, like, could be very possible that it's actually Peter mimicking his brother, because we don't know how much they sound alike with each other. I mean, with me and one of my brothers, we sound very much alike to the point that people get confused about actually who it's actually calling unless they know us really well, and it could be a possibility that Peter has actually been mimicking his brother's voice in order to lure the kids to a certain point so that they can ambush them and just shoot them all dead. That is a very good possibility that could actually happen, and I'm on board with that subject. I'm really glad that they actually think like it could be a trap. Emma goes on to think that someone's using the Minervan identity who isn't with the enemy, reached us through the line. That line, who? The original Minerva or Survivor of the Supporters? Again, I've got a strong sense that this was actually Peter mimicking his brother's voice. I agree with that. Or it could have potentially been Song Ju, because we saw that figure a few chapters ago cloaked over before he actually got the time skip, and that could potentially be Song Ju because we saw him. So it's either going to be Peter or Song Ju, although more than likely it might be Peter at this point. And they continue to go on and say to each other, for now, we're safe here, but there's a chance we might be attacked again at any time, just like in the shelter. And Oliver continues on to say, we don't know their intentions, but as long as we're facing the Ratari clan, getting in touch with this Minerva may be a good move. It would certainly help to have allies. But again, you have to be very cautious with this, Oliver, because if it really isn't the Minerva that you think it's actually going to be, then that's it's nice that you're actually thinking that it's a possibility that it could be an ally, but you also have to be on the fact that because William Minerva is actually now that we know it's actually a name that's being passed down through other people to be used as their own devices, you just don't know. And William Minerva, it could be the William Minerva as in Peter Matari, so you have to be very cautious about that. Oliver continues this conversation with Emma. Oh, and just a side note before I actually continue on, I really love this direction that the authors have taken in, because, like I said, Oliver's sort of like become the de facto leader for the kids that came from Goldie Pond, and Emma's sort of like the leader for the Gracefield kids along with Ray. And it's really nice that they're actually having this conversation as leaders, because they're essentially the ones that the kids are going to have to look up to at this point and really strive to make a difference in this world. And I really like that Oliver has taken on that mantle that Lucas and Hugo left for him. Sort of like Lucas passed on the torch for him. It's like, it's in your hands now, Oliver. You have to make a difference. But anyway, he goes on to say, maybe a small number of scouts, get in touch with them directly, try to get a feel for their character. And I like that as well. Like, just sending out a small group of people so that we can actually find out, is this person really on the up and up? But Emma gives sort of a look that's, I take away from this look that Emma gives, like, she doesn't want to do that. if it's going to be a small group of people, it has to be her. Like, she's the one who has to actually go out and scout this person without actually giving the kids to be in any danger. And Oliver is thinking to himself, and he probably agrees about this, before he goes on to say, they told me to show this mail to anyone, to everybody, in case they didn't return after a full day. And he looks very saddened as he goes, I knew it all along. Lucas had made his decision from the start, showing that Lucas knew that his time was up, but he had to get these kids out of here. But the least he could do was give them an option to buy the enemy some time whilst they escaped and found shelter and found a new place to call home themselves. Oliver continues and he says to Emma, but I couldn't stop them. I knew it all along and let them go. And we see a flashback of Lucas talking to Oliver and saying, my bad, thinking of it as respecting the wishes of a father and run. Don't come back here, protect everyone. Again, again, Lucas really passed on the torch to Oliver, and Oliver looked up to Lucas like he was his big brother or father figure, because none of the kids really have any fathers, so the closest that they really had to father figures were Lucas and Hugo that they could look up to, and see that bond break away. It's just heartbreaking, as Oliver carefully demonstrates in the flashback by his crying. And now Oliver has to take on that responsibility that Lucas and Hugo had of becoming the big brother / father figure to all of these kids. And he goes on to say, from now on we must protect all our family, whatever it takes, all by ourselves. And we see Emma looking up at him, but we don't see like her determined her response, but we can assume that she's very determined herself to actually keep those kids from getting in danger and actually surviving. So as Oliver continues to explain to Emma that this is including what Lucas and Hugo did, we see an owl, and again, just seeing this owl at this point, I'm gonna predict that this owl, when we see an owl like this, it's gonna be like, oh my god, bad shit is about to happen, and it pretty much is at the end of this chapter now that we've seen that owl. So anyway, it cuts to the morning where we see Alicia and Dominic and a few of the other kids going over to the overground and saying, we're used to going overground without being noticed. And we see some of the kids like actually backing up and saying, I'm sorry, Alicia, Dominic, is it really okay? And we see Dominic and Alicia, who are two of the Gracefield kids, looking up determined at some of the other kids, which might be the kids from Goldie Pond or might be kids from Gracefield. One of them, I think, might be Nate, although I could be wrong. But anyway, the point of this is like, we know why we can't go there, but we too don't want to just leave them behind. And it's showing like, okay, and this is actually the breakup of the groups as well, because some of the kids are actually not listening to some of the older kids, and they're actually going off on their own, which is a really bad thing because you don't know what's out there. And as they continue on, they say, Emma and the others need more information. We can just scout the area without going into the shelter. And I'm like, oh my god, don't do that, because you know what's going to happen. And sure enough, we see a figure approaching from behind a tree, saying, I found you. And it turns out to be Andrew, looking just so like his glasses are cracked. He's looked really bloodied up and battered and beaten, and he's like, found you. And this is where the chapter ends. Just there, with just Andrew just looking out for the kids, that he's actually found them. And this is something that I really wanted to actually talk about, which I'm going to do in a second. So yeah, that's the end of the chapter where we find out that Andrew is alive at this point. He's survived the explosion, and somebody actually left me a comment on when the chapter was posted to the Facebook page, actually saying, why is Andrew still alive? This is bullshit. Now, he didn't say bullshit, the person, but I had to respond to that and say like, okay, so it's not okay for Andrew to survive an explosion, but it's okay for Paris Sparrow in One Piece to survive an explosion. Point blank range. We don't even know if Andrew was like at point blank range when the explosion happened, but it was point blank range. He was on top of Pedro. Pedro had the bomb strapped to him, and he had a cigarette, and it's just like, boom, big explosion, probably bigger than the explosion here. And Perospero, even though he had a death root, he was still pretty much human, and he was in his 50s. He was in his 50s when that explosion happened. Andrew, we don't know how old he is, but we can assume he's younger than Perospero, and he's 5. So I don't understand the point of like, okay, so it's okay for One Piece to do something like this, cheapest out of a character stuff, but when Promise Neverland does it, that is bullshit. And it's a similar thing that happened with this week's Doctor 2 when they had a male pregnancy and people were complaining about that. And somebody pointed out, well, Red Dwarf did that 20 years ago, and people were like, oh, well, 20 years ago, people weren't sensitive now with snowflakes. Okay, so because One Piece is popular than the Promise Neverland, they're allowed to get away with doing the same exact thing? Sorry, I got a little bit carried away here, but that's just been bothering me all week, and I expected Andrew to survive because he's a really fascinating character, and to kill him off this early on into the arc, it's like, no, I even though I had it in the back of my mind that it's a possibility, my mind was saying like, no, Andrew is going to be alive, and it just really just hammers in the danger that these kids in, and it just hammers in like even some sacrifices. That is not the end all be all, and there could be people still coming after. There are still people coming after you. But anyway, that's the end of the chapter, and really good exposition in this chapter. Like, it was kind of like a chapter where it's like, okay, we need to relax, we need to find out what our next move is going to be, and sure enough, the next move is going to be like they have to find out what's going on, what other supplies that we can actually get before we actually have to go to the 7 Worlds. Obviously, Andrew has survived, and this actually goes back to my idea, like, if Andrew survived, obviously he's going to attack the kids, and this will probably be the moment where he actually gets to meet Sanju and Musica, and that would be an interesting dynamic to see, like, wait, Andrew seeing, like, wait, there are demons that are actually helping out these kids. So yeah, anyway, really good chapter, I really enjoyed it, and I really just wanted to get my rant out there about people like complaining, not just about this, but like with other series that actually do this, where characters have feats that really should have killed them, but they come back, but they're not dead. Particularly, okay, I know I'm gonna probably get a lot of flag for this, but Dragon Ball Z, where you have the Dragon Balls, like, oh, they could grant you one wish. Oh, Vegeta's dead. My friends are dead by Frieza. Oh, use the Dragon Balls, bring them back to life. Okay, that I don't care what people say. That is a Deus Ex Machina if I've ever seen one. But the fact that Andrew survived, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest, and it shouldn't have surprised you guys as well. But anyway, guys, that's just my opinion. I'm not sure what you guys are going to think of this chapter. You might not like the ending, but depending on where we go here, because Andrew is just such a fascinating villain. He has the calm, collective demeanor of Isabella, but he also has the bloodlust rage of Lewis. So it's like combining those two elements together create a really fascinating villain that I really want to find out more about. Him and Peter Vittori, I want to find out a lot more about them characters. But anyway, guys, what do you think? Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and this will be Lasher Luke signing off. Later, guys!